The old vendor's eyes were deep into the module of a marble statue. Deep wrinkles from the corner of his eyes stretched down his cheeks, offering a hawk-like appearance. Despite this, he had a warm demeanor when he spoke, and perhaps it was that which made me purchase from his stall in the winter market. "How may I help you today, fine lady?" he asked. I did not know what I was looking for. I had been fascinated by the dusty old relics that filled the front area of his stall, and I had simply thought to admire them. He had fancy merchandise that caught the eye. When he saw that I did not respond to him, he let me be and simply watched me go through his merchandise in silence. A small statuette, no more than 4 inches, of a female figure draped in red clothing, stretching her hand out, stuck out for me. I picked it up. "That one. It's from the USSR. I acquired it when I was there. At least 300 years, he explained. I sighed and nodded my head in agreement. I didn't need it. It would not fit into the decor of my living quarters, and I did not really have enough money to throw into trifling things. It was winter, and things were slow. As I put down the statuette, a mirror decorated with carvings of ivy and roses, frozen in silver, caught my eyes, and I knew I had to get it. I picked it up and looked the old vendor in the eyes. I noticed for the first time that his gray pair of pupils had a glint to them. "How much?" I asked. "50, he said, the shortest response he has given me since I had come to his store. He offered no backstory to the mirror, but I caught him wearing a more wary smile on his face as he wrapped my purchase in brown paper and took my money. I did not think about it too deeply. All I knew was the mirror would fit into my living space, and it's what I got. I hung the mirror in my bedroom once I arrived home, and I loved it from the first glance. It was in pristine, clean condition, and I suspected that it had an interesting story if I had bothered to ask the man about it. I shrugged it off and went about the rest of my daily routine. I returned to my bedroom sometime late in the evening, ready to finish my work in the confines of my bedroom before a night of sleep. Or so I thought. One glance over at the new mirror in my room, and I felt an odd sensation wash over me, like déjà vu. For a moment, it felt to me as though the mirror had been in my room the entire time. It was strange, so I marched gingerly to examine it for why I felt that way. I almost collapsed from dread when I finally stood in front of the mirror. The image of myself in my nightgown appeared first, and then it slowly started to fade away. Panic gnawed in my stomach, and my muscles turned tense in my limbs. An image of a cold, snowy landscape, endless and eerie, under a heavy sky filled the mirror. My heart beating in my chest started to ache, and I could feel the riveting echoes in my ears. Trapped by utter dread, I watched as the image of 2 men appeared, one on each side of the frame. They had dark eyes in a vertically oval shape with pupils that danced in them. They smiled at me from the mirror, and my physical body was overcome by heat. I struggled to escape the mirror, but I could not. It was as though I was pressed against an invisible barrier from behind, and my legs were rooted to the floor. "You never really escaped, did you?" One of the male figures in the mirror said to me. He flicked his tongue at me and started the march towards me. The other figure joined him and moved closer and closer to the edge of the mirror. "Come here, Sarah. Play with us," the other male figure said, and suddenly there was an image of me in the mirror being pulled on the snowy floor by her hair. I broke down in tears in my room as I watched them begin the torture of cutting my hair with shears. In my room, I touched my hair and was shocked to discover that my hair was lower than I recalled it to be, and it felt chopped. The chill that went through my spine caused me to tremble. When my hair was cut in the mirror, the male figures brought out a long knife, which they ran across my flesh, from my neck down to my forearms. Blood seeped slowly from the injury. In my room, I traced the spot from my neck to my right forearm, and to my utter consternation, I had a huge gash similar to the injury my figure in the mirror was suffering. The next thing they did was remove my warm clothes I had worn in the blistering cold. In my room, I shuddered at the horrific manner they executed their plan, tying me with thin, 3-twined sisal ropes. The ropes were so sharp, like barbs. And watching my figure in the mirror, I could already see my body fainting slowly from the trauma of being tied too tightly. When I had been tied, one of the men brought out a syringe, loaded it with a chemical, and injected it into my neck. I whimpered where I stood in my room as I witnessed myself alone and vulnerable with those demons, and it all came to me. I looked at my wrists and my body, and there was evidence of the ropes leaving their mark on me. I reconciled my stay at a motel 6 months ago and how 2 strange men had abducted me. How was it now a memory that I did not have? I was beside myself, crying my eyes out. I remembered it all, the sting of the needle, the muffled voices as they mentioned abandoning me to die out in the cold, the sound of their laughter as I drifted into darkness. I staggered away from the mirror as the nightmare vanished from the mirror, and once again, it was just a reflection of me in my room. "No, no, no!" I cried. I rushed towards the mirror and smashed it on the floor to end my trauma. The first time someone went missing in our small village was the worst. I had never seen the good people of Elric be so paranoid about anything. I was born in Elric, and I had lived there all of my life with my father, mother, and my 3 siblings, 1 older and 2 younger. I knew Elric like I knew the palm of my hands, at least for 21 good years. My parents had known the village much longer. Still, it stunned us all. The victim had been the unassuming ginger, Caldwell, who lived a few streets away from our house. The men in the village had been summoned to the village center to deliberate on the matter. His wife claimed that he had gone out in the winter cold, against her better judgment, as it was the first day of winter and he had not returned, not for 3 days after that. She was probed and asked why she had not reported him missing after 3 whole days of his disappearance. The men with common sense in the gathering thought it unwise to probe a mourning woman. If she was guilty, she'd have escaped the village anyway. We had neither the might nor the police intelligence to scout her from wherever she may have fled to. A search party was sent out for Caldwell, led by the clockmaker Glenn Finch, upon his insistence. They searched for half a day in the blistering cold, and Caldwell was found as a corpse about 3 miles north from the village in the woods. A large bump behind his head, which was now a purple patch from the cold eating into the wound, hinted that he had been hit from behind and left to die. And his legs had been broken, hanging like a macabre flesh stick on his sides. Those who saw his body had horrifying nightmares for days. Then another person went missing, a younger man this time, in his prime, Fleming. Fleming was a bachelor, so he was missing for at least a week before anybody noticed. He was noticed because a man he owed labor to in a farm started to look for him. Again, the men gathered at the village center and formed a search party to search for Fleming in the biting winter cold. The search was set up again to be led by Glenn Finch, the clockmaker, and the search went on from dawn until nightfall before the men found Fleming's body. They said Fleming had frozen up so much his face was unrecognizable in the frost. The cold had eaten into his flesh and made a mess of his body. He was left there since there was no family or wife to cater for his corpse. The 3rd person who disappeared in Elric was declared missing by sunset by his family. They said he had gone out into the winter cold to get some supplies and had not been home by the time he said he would return. Heightened tensions and dread from what may have happened to him at nightfall had triggered a call to search for him. A brief description was given about him. His name was Mason. He was 5 feet and 7 inches tall. He was 18 years old, stocky, and had green eyes. A search party was called for, but nothing was made of the search that night because Glenn, the clockmaker of our small village, was not found in his house to lead the search. By morning, Glenn had returned, and the entire village converged once and for all to deal with the issue of deaths and frozen corpses. It was decided that electing Glenn was important because he had found the two bodies prior. The debate on the best way to find Mason had gone on for a bit until someone spoke from the crowd, asking why it was only Glenn who had managed to find the other two bodies when nobody had been able to find Mason. There was a brief silence, shuffled between the draft of cold air into weary lungs. "Maybe because I know how to see things others don't," Glenn answered curtly. It was an unsatisfactory answer, but he waved it off with the back of his hand. "Do you suspect me now? You have no need for my help?" "Perhaps," someone reasoned in the crowd. "A monster was seizing people in the village and killing them." Glenn was a good man, the villagers reasoned. "I was there, and I saw how glowingly they spoke of him." Glenn had built the village a magnificent clock tower before winter. It was an edifice that would cost the villagers a handsome fee if any other handyman had been employed for that. For his good work, someone said. It would be unfortunate to accuse him of things that were not established. "Where were you last night?" the same person asked again, and this time, from where I stood, I could see who was speaking. He was a man whose name I did not know, but whose face I had seen enough times since the winter disappearances started. "Again with the accusations. I will not be subject to a witch hunt for my efforts to help Elric," Glenn declared, eyes sweeping through the crowd that suddenly had now gathered around him, with him at the center of attention. The man, whose name I did not know, did not back down. Instead, he stepped into the encirclement with Glenn. He explained that he had suspicions for a while about Glenn and his mysterious clock tower. Nobody knew how the mechanics of such a large contraption worked. We only knew that it told time, and it made a loud chime every o'clock. Colwell's body was not killed where it was found, the man reasoned, because there was no blood around the area where he had been found. Glenn objected. The man said the way the legs were positioned and broken showed that he suffered violently before he died, and so should have resisted with blood splatter everywhere. The other body belonging to Fleming was also not killed where it was found. If he had been killed there, the floor around him would still be bloodied, and the snow would have preserved the bloodstains. "Enough, you worthless wretch!" Glenn cried. But the man did not stop, and by then he had the attention of all of us villagers. The conclusion he reached was that wherever Mason was, Glenn already knew. "You pathetic wretches! Your life is not worth anything anyway." Glenn's sudden outburst took us all by surprise. He would kill us all one by one at the clock tower if he had his way. His eyes, evil and cold, was something we did not expect to see. What could we do to him? Mason was dead anyways, he revealed. Maybe the cold would get to him before we did. Or maybe we would get to him before the cold. The villagers had had enough of his words, and before he could continue, he was mobbed and battered to death in a matter of minutes. Afterwards, his clock tower was pulled down.
Lydia was more than just my aunt. She was my confidant, my role model, and often my second mother. Growing up, I spent countless weekends at her place, baking cookies, watching movies, and talking about everything. Lydia had a knack for making everyone feel special, a trait that made her loved by all who knew her. She had been single for a long time, focusing on her career and her passions. When she met Trevor, it was as if a missing piece had finally fallen into place.
"He's so romantic,"
she gushed to me one afternoon.
"He surprises me with flowers and writes me little notes. It feels like I've been waiting for him all this time."
I remember the first time I met Trevor. He was tall, with an easy smile and a charming demeanor that put everyone at ease. Lydia introduced him to the family during a weekend barbecue, and everyone instantly liked him. He was attentive to Lydia, always making sure she had everything she needed. They looked happy, so I was delighted for her. But as the weeks passed, cracks began to show.
He's a bit jealous.
She admitted one evening over tea.
He doesn't like it when I talk to people too much. He says it feels disrespectful, like I'm not fully committed to him.
I frowned. Lydia, that sounds controlling. Have you talked to him about it? She nodded, brushing it off.
It's just because he cares so much. He'll get better. He promised.
Despite my unease, I didn't push further. I wanted to believe she was right, that things would improve, but they didn't. I started noticing subtle changes in Lydia. She stopped coming to our regular family gatherings, often making excuses about being busy or not feeling well. When I did see her, she seemed more reserved, less like her usual vibrant self. One evening, she called me, her voice shaky.
He got upset today,
she said.
I was talking to a coworker after work, and Trevor saw us. He waited until we got home to confront me. He said I was disrespecting him, embarrassing him. I tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen.
Lydia, you don't have to tolerate this, I said, my concern growing. You deserve someone who trusts you, she sighed.
I know, but I love him. And when he's not like this, he's wonderful. He says he's sorry, that he just gets scared of losing me.
I didn't know what else to say. I could see his hold on her and how he manipulated her feelings. I wanted to help, but I felt powerless. As I approached the building, a sense of unease settled over me. I climbed the steps, my heart pounding in my chest. When I reached the door, I knocked softly at first, then harder when there was no response. Suddenly, the door creaked open, revealing Trevor, Lydia's boyfriend. His eyes were wild, his hair disheveled, and his clothes wrinkled and stained red. The sight of him sent a chill down my spine. "Is Lydia here?" I asked, my voice trembling. Trevor stood in the doorway, blocking my view inside. She's not feeling well," he muttered, avoiding eye contact. I pushed past him, my gut telling me I needed to see for myself. What I saw will haunt me forever. Lydia's lifeless body lay sprawled on the couch, her eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. Her chest was a gaping hole where her heart should have been. Red soaked the cushions, the floor, everything. I stumbled back, bile rising in my throat. "What did you do?" I screamed, turning my face to Trevor. His expression was a mixture of panic and resignation. I fumbled with my phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. "Please, hurry!" I cried into the phone. "My aunt! She's dead! Her boyfriend! He killed her!" The dispatcher assured me help was coming, but the minutes felt like hours. I hid in the stairwell, listening for any signs that Trevor might come after me. When I finally heard the sirens, relief washed over me. The police arrested Trevor on the spot. He confessed to everything. The escalating jealousy, the possessiveness, the final, horrific act of violence. He told them about the waiter at the restaurant the night before, how he had complimented Lydia, and how that pushed Trevor over the edge. Trevor had been charming initially, sweeping Lydia off her feet with his romantic gestures and kind words. She had fallen hard, believing she had found the man of her dreams. But slowly, his true nature revealed itself. He began accusing her of being too nice to others, seeing her kindness as betrayal. That night at the restaurant, when the waiter had asked if they were siblings and tried to give Lydia his number, Trevor's jealousy boiled over. He managed to keep it together until they got back to her apartment. But once inside, He lost control. In a blind rage, he choked her to death. And then, in an act so depraved, he cut out her heart. The trial was swift. Trevor showed no remorse, his eyes empty as he was sentenced to life in prison. But for me, and everyone who loved Lydia, the pain and the horror will never fade. I visit Lydia's grave often, bringing her fresh flowers and speaking to her as if she could hear me. I tell her about the things she's missing, the small joys and sorrows of life, and I remind her that those who knew her deeply and truly loved her.